So hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, smarter insights into the Mains 2025 question paper. And through this analysis, we'll be understanding the structuring and the presentation of the answer along with the content that we need to present to score very good marks. And today we have some very important questions which are asked in General Studies paper 1. So we'll be understanding the themes of those questions and how to write the answers for those questions, and we'll also understand the structuring and what type of a content that you should present so that you can score very good marks in such questions. So the first question is, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule's writings and efforts of social reforms touched issues of almost all subaltern classes. Now here subaltern classes means that the marginalized sections of the society or the deprived sections of the society. So we all knew that these deprived and marginalized sections of the society are facing the historical injustice, right? So therefore, how Jyotirao Phule writings and all his efforts of social reforms touched these subaltern classes, so we have to discuss this. Now if you look at the model framework in the introduction, what you have to do, so in the introduction you just briefly introduce about Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, and he is actually a 19th century social reformer from the state of Maharashtra. And then if needed, you could briefly mention about his mission to fight caste oppression, gender inequality, social injustice and women education, because these all belong to the social reform. Now in the body part of the answer, so just mention his efforts to uplift lower castes and mention examples also along with such points, and then his efforts for the women's education or women's rights and peasants, farmers and the abandoned groups. So in the body part of the answer you have to mention all these essential things. And finally in the conclusion of this answer, so you just mentioned that how his reforms touched almost all oppressed sections of the society and how his social reform movement has culminated into the justice for the deprived and disadvantaged sections of the society. So you have to write so all those points in the conclusion of this answer. Now if you look at the answer for this question, as I have already told you in the introduction, you just briefly introduce about Mahatma Jyotirao Phule. So he is a social reformer from the state of Maharashtra, and in fact he is not just a social reformer but he is also a writer and an activist from the state of Maharashtra. And in fact he worked on number of areas which are primarily focused on the justice to the disadvantaged and marginalized sections of the society. For example, he fought against the caste oppression or caste discrimination which was existing at that point of time, and apart from that, gender inequality was also rooted in this society at that point of time, the patriarchal nature of the society, so that generally discouraged women education. However, Jyotirao Phule fought for the women education, and in fact the social injustice suffered by the disadvantaged sections of the society. So therefore essentially what I would like to say is that his social reform movement essentially touched all sections of the society, particularly the subaltern classes during the 19th century. So right, so you just have to remember that Mahatma Jyotirao Phule is a 19th century social reformer, writer and activist. And in fact his writings, his institutions, his activism. So in fact Mahatma Jyotirao Phule has raised his voice for the marginalized, deprived and disadvantaged sections of the society, and those disadvantaged sections are known as subaltern classes. So remember, as I've already told you, that those disadvantaged sections of the society are being called as the subaltern classes. For example, if you have a sociology optional, political science optional, so you very often come across this term subaltern classes. Those are the disadvantaged sections of the society. Now let's understand the next part of the answer, which is the empowerment of the lower caste. So how the activism of Jyotirao Phule has influenced or led to the development of the subaltern classes, or how it has influenced the subaltern classes, particularly Dalits and Bahujans, because they are the primary focus areas, right? So in fact Mahatma Jyotirao Phule has written a book called Gulamgiri, right? So you have to remember this book because this is very important from prelims point of view, and even if you write a mains answer about the Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, you have to mention his book called Gulamgiri. So Gulamgiri translates to slavery, right? So it translates to slavery, and in fact in his book Gulamgiri, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule compared the condition of Indian Shudras or the subaltern classes, or if I say Bahujans or Dalits, to the African slaves in America. So the the conditions that the Africans have been facing in America, the same condition that the Bahujans or Dalits have been facing in India also. This is what he told in his book called Gulamgiri, so which literally translates to slavery. And apart from that, he in his book Gulamgiri, he in fact exposed the hypocrisy of the Brahmanical system as well. Now at that point of time, the Brahmanical system was top at the hierarchy of the caste system, right? So it is actually top at the hierarchy of the caste system, and they strictly practice the caste system as well. So therefore he actually exposed the hypocrisy of the Brahmanical system that oppress lower caste in the name of religion, right? So as per the Brahmanical system, the oppressed class, the lower castes are actually the oppressed class. So in the name of religion, they are being branded as the lower caste. So therefore he actually criticized and even exposed the hypocrisy of the Brahmanical system at that point of time. Now when you write an answer, it is always advised to mention an example also, so that your answer will become more and more legitimate and authentic. Now here he actually questioned the Varna system, right? So in India, so there are 4 Varnas. We all knew about those 4 Varnas: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Sudras. So therefore he actually questioned the Varna system, and he also called this as a tool of exploitation and argued that education and dignity were the rights of all, right? So education and dignity were the rights of all men. So this is what he actually argued that. And next you need to talk about the upliftment of women and girls, because he also fought for the upliftment of women and girl, because at that point of time gender inequality was widely practiced, right? So patriarchal society was the dominant structure in the society, and women were not encouraged to go to schools and colleges. So therefore he also, along with his wife, fought for the upliftment of women and girls. So his wife's name is Savitribai Phule. So therefore Jyotirao Phule and Savitribai Phule, they have started the first school for the girls in Pune 1848, right? So in the year 1848, so they have started the first school for the girls, so that the parents of these girls, they will send their kids to the schools, right? So they have opened these schools, and in fact they also opened schools for the widows and the Shudra girls also, right? So at that point of time there were Shudra girls and women widows, and in fact there was a miserable condition for the widows, right? So miserable condition for the widows, and in fact widows were not part of the active social life, and in fact Shudra girls were not encouraged to go to schools, and in fact they were also discriminated. So therefore in fact through these efforts, both Savitribai Phule and Jyotirao Phule, so they opened schools for the widows and Shudra girls, so breaking the gender and caste barriers. So the best example would be, as I've already told you, that women education was denied at that point of time, but Phule's, both Savitribai Phule and Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, they taught that girls from all backgrounds, especially from Dalit communities, so they should come and attend the schooling, right? So therefore for the upliftment of women, they have made a important contribution. And next we need to talk about the fight against the caste based oppression, right? So if we talk about the caste based oppression, as I've already told you that we have a Varna system. From the Varna system, this caste based hierarchies have started developing, right? So therefore they also fought against the caste based oppression, and they opposed the caste system, right? Because Phule has established Satyasodak Samaj. So he established Satyasodak Samaj. right? So he established this in the year 1873. Now, what is the purpose of establishing the Satyasodak Samaj? To promote this truth seeking and fight caste discrimination, because at that point of time caste hierarchies were there and prevalent. So therefore, in order to fight these caste hierarchies, caste discrimination, so Mahatma Jyotirao Phule established the Satyasodak Samaj in the year 1873. And apart from that, he not even exposed the Brahmanical domination or Brahmanical system, but he also opposed the priestly dominance and rituals that actually kept the poor in a fear and ignorance, right? So the best example would be, he encouraged non-Brahmins to conduct their own marriages and religious ceremonies without the Brahmin priests. Now at that point of time, the society was like that the essential rituals must be conducted by the Brahmins, and marriages should also be done by the Brahmins, right? So therefore, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule encouraged the other caste groups also to conduct their own marriages. So if there is any ritual, you just do those rituals yourself, so that you can reduce the Brahmanical domination. So this is what he actually advocated. And apart from that, he also advocated for the farmers and the rural poor as well, right? So in fact, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule is being called as the voice of poor peasants, because so Mahatma Jyotirao Phule has criticized the exploitative jamindari system. So at that point of time, there was a jamindari system, and this jamindari system is also known as the permanent settlement. And in fact, this jamindari system is truly exploitative in nature, right? So jamindars very often collect unjust, unfair taxes from the peasants. So therefore, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule has opposed the existing exploitative jamindari system. And apart from that, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule has also demanded land reforms and fair treatment for the farmers, especially for the lower caste groups, right? Because if you there is a need for the land reforms. So agriculture was the primary occupation of the people. So if land reforms are carried out, so these land reforms will help the poor peasant farmers to come out of this poverty cycle. And he also advocated for the fair treatment of the farmers, especially from the lower caste groups. So the best example would be, so he wrote about the miseries of the peasants, right? So he published the pamphlets, and in those pamphlets he talked about the miseries that the peasants have been going through, because peasants very often used to pay a very higher amount of taxes, and they left hardly nothing, right? So therefore, they faced a lot of miseries in the hands of the local jamindars, landlords, money lenders, and the British government as well. So therefore, he published the pamphlets. Those pamphlets have been advocating the miseries of the peasants, and he even criticized the British and Indian elites for neglecting them. So at that point of time, there was an elite group, for example, the educated middle class. Now educated middle class actually neglected the peasant or the lower caste farmers, right? So therefore, he started criticizing the British and Indian elite for neglecting the peasant groups. So after Mahatma Gandhi came to participate or came to India, so he lent support to the farmers through a number of areas, right? So in number of areas, for example, Champaran Satyagraha is the best example where Mahatma Gandhi lent his support to the farmers, right? So after Mahatma Gandhi lent his support to the farmers and after the success of Champaran Satyagraha, so farmers started participating in the national movement on a large scale, and the nationalist leaders also taking up the farmers issues seriously, right? So apart from that, support for the widows and the socially outcast groups. So if we talk about the support for the widows and socially outcast groups, so there are certain social reforms as well which are being carried out, right? So as I've already told you that the condition of widows was miserable, right? So miserable condition of widows, and there are certain castes within the society, so their condition was also miserable. So therefore Pule campaigned against the child marriage. So as of now, the marriage age of a girl child would be 18 years, and for men it would be 21 years. So however, at that point of time there was a widespread prevalence of the child marriages. So he campaigned against the child marriage, and he also campaigned against sati and inhumane treatment of the widows as well, right? So apart from that, he also advocated widow remarriage and social acceptance of the outcast groups. So there are certain caste groups who used to live outside the village, right? So therefore he established the home for the pregnant widows who were often abandoned by society. So therefore he offered them dignity and safety as well. And even so, he was also the critic of the religious orthodoxy. So when we talk about his critic of religious orthodoxy, so he actually adopted the rational thought, and he also advocated the value of equality. So he used to say that everyone are equal, and the caste system is inherently exploitative, oppressive in nature. So therefore Pule has urged people to question the existing religious texts, because the religious texts have been advocating the caste discrimination, they have been advocating the Varna system. So therefore he questioned the religious texts, much like a Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And in fact there are some religious texts which have justified the caste system and gender oppression. So they have advocated for the gender equality. So therefore those religious texts which have advocated the caste system and gender oppression, so he questioned them and he also criticized them. And in fact he was the strong believer of rationalism, humanism, promoting equality over the blind faith of the people. Now the best example would be he rejected the authority of Manusmriti and promoted religion based on equality and justice. Now in the conclusion of this answer, what you have to write, right? So ultimately you need to write so the contribution that has been made by Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, and that has shaped Indian society over a period of time. Now in fact Indian society is much more egalitarian now compared to the 18th century and 19th century. The credit should go to the social reformers like Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, right? So Mahatma Jyotirao Phule's life and work were dedicated to the upliftment of the oppressed sections of the society or disadvantaged sections of the society. Now when I say the oppressed classes, for example women, widows, farmers or outcast groups, so they are being called as the oppressed sections of the society. So therefore through his writings and the educational reforms and also social activism, what he did, so he touched almost every subaltern group, right? So he made immense contribution in every field, and that has led to the upliftment of the subaltern groups or Dalits. So therefore his legacy continues in spite of to inspire social justice movements in India and beyond. So after Mahatma Jyotirao Phule's huge contribution for the upliftment of the marginalized sections of the society or subaltern sections, so there were other social reforms inspired from Mahatma Jyotirao Phule all across India, right? So therefore this is how you have to write a positive conclusion in the answer. So the next question is about the integration of India immediately after independence. Now understand, this is very important theme, because previously also UPSC has asked questions from this particular theme. So therefore you have to understand this theme. Now the question is, trace India's consolidation process during the early phases of independence. So we all knew that 1947 we have got independence from the colonial rulers. So after immediate independence, so how the consolidation process has begun in number of areas, for example with respect to polity, economy, education and international relations. So we have to discuss and understand the consolidation of India in all these different areas, right? So firstly what you have to do, we have to write the introduction for this question. So you have to briefly introduce India's situation post 1947. So India's situation after its independence, right? So India is newly independent country, it's a diverse nation, and it has been facing numerous challenges like poverty, gender inequality, uh, you know number of other problems, right? So therefore you should briefly introduce India's situation post 1947. And in the body part of the answer, what you have to write. So in the body part of the answer, so they have already asked that the India's consolidation process immediately after independence in terms of polity. So polity should be a heading, and under the polity you have to write the important points. For example, the integration of the princely states. And in the integration of the princely states, a former Home Minister Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel played an instrumental role in the integration of all the princely states. So you have to mention that, and then you need to talk about the economy. So from the economy perspective, you have to write about the planning commission, 5-year plans. So you should mention all those things. And from the perspective of education, expansion of the primary education and higher education, because at that point of time there were higher levels of illiteracy. So therefore it was very important for India to increase the literacy rates, right? So after that you have to talk about the international relations, where Nehru has followed the policy of non-alignment, right? So you have to talk about the polity, economy, education and international relations, and the consolidation process immediately after India's independence. And ultimately you have to summarize this consolidation process and how it has laid the strong foundations for the later stages of development for the India. So you just have to mention this in this answer. Now in the introduction, what you have to write, so in introduction, so you have to mention India's consolidation process after independence. So we all knew that India got independence in the year 1947 from the colonial rulers. So when India has got independence in the year 1947, so it was politically divided, right? So it was not united because there were a number of princely states and also the existing British directly ruled states as well. So therefore it was politically divided. So therefore the big task before the Indian leaders was to integrate the entire nation politically, and we are economically weak. So higher levels of poverty, miserable conditions of the peasants, and majority of the people are illiterate, and large chunk of population have been dependent on agriculture sector. So therefore we were economically weak also and socially fragmented as well, right? So the challenges, like there were 562 princely states were existing. So therefore the immediate challenge would be integrating all those princely states politically, and that is very important. And there was a massive levels of poverty, illiteracy and refugee crisis post partition as well. So these were the major challenges immediately after independence that India had to deal with, right? So however, the early leaders of India, so immediately after independence, so they took some major steps to consolidate the nation in terms of polity, in terms of economically, and education and international relations. So they took some major steps. So those major steps help consolidate the nation and also lay the foundation for a modern, united and a democratic state, right? So first let's understand the political consolidation. So if we talk about the political consolidation, now in fact leaders like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, they played an instrumental role when it comes to the integration of the princely states, right? Because as I've already told you that there were 562 princely states which were existing. 562 princely states were existing. And in fact, so he played an instrumental role in the integration of 562 princely states into the Indian Union. And in fact, the methods like diplomacy, persuasion and even force. So when I say force, the best example would be Hyderabad Police Action 1948, which is also called as Operation Polo, right? So the best example of using force would be Junagadh, Hyderabad and Kashmir. So these were the major challenges in the integration of India politically, right? So the Treaty of Accession has been signed by the Kashmir Raja Hari Singh, and Hyderabad was merged into India through the operation or through the police action, and Junagadh was also merged into India. So they actually pose major challenges, and those challenges were resolved by the political strategy or the military intervention, right? So next we'll have to talk about the adoption of the constitution. So if we talk about the adoption of the constitution of India was adopted on 26 January 1950. So this was the time that the constitution has been adopted, right? So therefore the constitution established India as a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. And in fact, so this is mentioned in the preamble of the Indian constitution, right? So immediately after constitution came into existence, we have an independent constitutional body called Election Commission of India, and we also accepted the universal adult franchise. Now what exactly is a universal adult franchise? So everyone who is about 21 years of age will be given a voting right irrespective of your caste, your religion, or any race, any language, any region you belong to. However, after the 61st Constitutional Amendment Act, the voting age has been reduced from earlier 21 to 18 years, right? So I hope it is clear for you. Now we have to talk about the economic consolidation of India immediately after its independence. Now we had the planned economic development because India adopted the planned economy model under Jawaharlal Nehru. So Jawaharlal Nehru was our first prime minister, and we have adopted the planned economic model under Jawaharlal Nehru. And in fact, so we have adopted the Planning Commission in the year 1950. So Planning Commission was established in the year 1950, and Planning Commission was actually have the powers to allocate resources to different states as well. So anyway, in the year 2015, the NDA government has replaced the Planning Commission with the Niti Aayog, which is National Institution for Transforming India, right? So under the Jawaharlal Nehru, we have adopted the mixed economy, which has the features or characters of both socialist and the capitalist economies, right? So under the Planning Commission, we have started the first 5-year plan 51-56, and this first 5-year plan has focused on agriculture, irrigation and rural development, because you have to understand that majority of India's population have been dependent on agriculture sector. They're getting livelihood from the agriculture sector, right? So in fact, the Bakranangal Dam, so dams were called as the temples, right? So the modern temples, right? So therefore Bakranangal Dam, Nagarjuna Sagar Dam, so those dams were built, and they played a very important role in agriculture and prosperity of the agriculture sector, right? So we need to talk about the industrialization and the public sector units, because the second 5-year plan, it has focused on the industrialization, right? So in 1956 and 61, it has focused on the heavy industries, right? So it has focused on heavy industries, and it has promoted the self-reliance through the public sector industries. So the examples would be establishment of steel plants in Bhilai, Durgapur, Rourkela, right? So all these are the examples of industrialization, the focus on industrialization with the foreign collaboration. Then we need to talk about the educational consolidation. So if we talk about the educational consolidation, so there has been an expansion of primary and higher education in India, because immediately after independence, the challenge was that we were having the higher levels of the illiteracy rates. So therefore the focus should be on universal education, giving education to everyone without any discrimination, without any parity, right? So without any discrimination. So therefore that will help fight the problem of illiteracy. And in fact, there are massive investment made in schools, colleges and universities as well. So the best example would be the University Grants Commission that was established in the year 1956. So the University Grants Commission has been established specifically to look after the higher education in India. And then promotion of science and technology, because Nehru emphasized on scientific temper and even the modern outlook, right? So he even founded the premier research institutions like IITs and other important institutes. For example, the Indian Institute of Technology, that was IIT Kharagpur. So IIT Kharagpur was the first IIT that was established in the year 1951. They are actually called as premier educational institutions in India. And Indian Council of Agriculture Research has been established, and it further strengthened to improve the farming methods in India, thereby alleviating the miseries of the farmers. And in the arena of international relations, so we have followed a policy called non-alignment movement. Why? Because at that point of time the world was divided into two major blocks: the socialist bloc led by USSR and the capitalist bloc led by US, right? So in fact, the First World War, Second World War, and in fact this rivalry between socialist bloc and capitalist bloc may lead to the Third World War also at that point of time. But countries in the global south, so they avoided this confrontation or rivalry. They come together and they formed non-aligned movement, and in fact at that point of time India was the leader and key advocate of the non-alignment movement. So we will not align with any of these blocks, either the Eastern Bloc or the Western Bloc. So India chose non-alignment during the Cold War period, and in fact the post Second World War till 1990s, so that particular period is called as the Cold War period, right? Because there was no direct military confrontation at that point of time, so it was called as the Cold War, right? So post Second World War till 1990s, because during 1990s what happened was there was a collapse of Soviet Union, and that led to the end of Cold War and the sole hegemony of establishing hegemony of US, right? So India chose non-alignment during the Cold War times. So India said that we will not be siding with either USA or USSR, and it was co-founded by the non-aligned movement with Yugoslavia, Egypt, Indonesia plus India. So these countries have come together and they have established the non-alignment movement. Now the best example would be Nehru's speech at Bandung Conference in the year 1955, and this speech of Nehru has actually laid the foundation for the non-aligned movement. And then we have to talk about the peaceful foreign policy that India has adopted, and the directive principles of state policy have also mentioned about the peaceful foreign policy that the state needs to pursue. So therefore India has advocated for the peaceful coexistence and the Panchashil 5 principles with China in the year 1954. So however, this was a strategic blunder on the part of the early leaders, and this has led to underestimating China, right? So, or taking China mistakenly, right? So this has led to 1962 India-China war, right? So we never expected China would attack us, because we have followed the Panchashil principles and we have advocated the peaceful coexistence. So the best example would be Indo-China Panchashil Agreement 1954. So that has aimed at mutual respect and non-aggression, right? So the Panchashil principles have emphasized on mutual respect and non-aggression, but this has led to the 1962 war. Now ultimately in the conclusion, what you have to write, so in the conclusion, how these early efforts have laid the foundation for the later stages of development of a nation, right? So the early years of independence were crucial, and in fact they laid the foundation for the modern India. So from the political integration to economic planning, from educational reforms to establishing India's voice in the international community, and therefore ultimately India emerged as a sovereign and self-assured democracy, right? So despite all these challenges that India was faced politically, economically, in terms of education, international relations, so the period from 1947 to 1964, so this period was marked by visionary leadership, institutional building, and a firm commitment to unity and progress, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much.